What's going on, everybody? Hey, chat, how are you? Welcome to the VS Code release party. Do you like my mug? I just bought this. You seen this joke before? Hey, chat, what's up? Welcome. I feel like the chat just dropped from 28 to 18, and I feel like it's because people came on and they were like, oh, it's not Olivia? Never mind, I'm out. Hey, Ahmad, what's up? What's going on? Yeah, see? Like, is this, oh, no, it's not Olivia. Oh. Hey, what's up? Hey, it's Alessandro. What's up, Alessandro? Good to see you. Little cousin, what's going on? What's up, everybody? How are y'all doing on Thursday? MC Naveen, when can I start training Copilot with docs URL? Ooh, we actually there may be an answer for that in this session, in this stream today. Joyce is backstage. I'm looking at her. Maybe Joyce can remember this. Yeah, got the thumbs up. Awesome. What's up from Poland? What's going on? Meridius? Is I saying that right? Meridius? Meridius? I'm sorry, I probably butchered that. I apologize. I'm American after all. I'm sorry. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. This is our Thursday release party, the 1.87 release. The most notable thing is that if you're with us before, usually Olivia is here doing these. Olivia is on leave, but don't worry, she is coming back. I am just going to fill in for her while she's gone, and I'm going to try and do as good a job as she does. We'll see how that goes. I don't know that I can, but it's great to see so many people here. Imran, what's going on? Imran from India. Awesome. I'm glad you're here. From Saudi Arabia, Ghana. Yo, what time is it where you are, chat? I mean, we got people from all over the world. It is 10 o'clock here in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I'm located. What's your time zone? Just drop it in the chat here. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so this is our 1.87 release. We've got some great presenters today. We're going to dive in and talk about VS Code speech, chat extensibility. We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. But before we do that, as always, we want to thank our great contributors to the 1.87 release. All right, so let me share my screen here. Entire screen? I don't think so. That's a little dangerous. All right, here we go. Release notes. So here's our release notes. This is the 1.87 release. And if you remember correctly, we're always like a month behind. So when we're in March, we call that the February release. In April, when we release again, we'll call that the March release, but it is the 1.87 release. And look at all of these wonderful contributors down here. Look at all these PRs. I mean, this is just awesome. So a huge thanks to all of these folks here who contributed to the 1.87 release of VS Code. Thank you so much for all that you do to help make VS Code what it is. We so appreciate that. That is awesome. All right, let me stop sharing here. 5 p.m. in Germany. What's up, Jamaica? To Shane, nice to see you. +3 GMT, so that's 6. I'm gonna do math. Help, Chad. I can't do it. It's 6 p.m. Is it 6? No, 7 p.m. I'm gonna say 7 p.m. 1 p.m. in Brazil. Nice. 4 p.m. in Ghana. Nice, 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 nice. All right, good to see everybody. So with that, let's jump right into it because we've got quite a bit to do today, and we've got 2 very distinguished guests. Very pleased to have them on. The first one is Ben Pasero or Benjamin. Ben or Benjamin, right? Either's fine.
Ben is good, yeah. Usually.
And I pronounced the last name correctly. Did I get that right? I didn't clear.
Yes, you did. You did.
All
actually.
right,
you
awesome.
might be the first one.
Now I noticed that you have the same house that everybody has that I talk to on Microsoft Teams. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. I'm actually at home, and this in the background is not how it looks like, but I sort of like it.
You got the grand piano.
I used to play the piano, so that
Did
is.
you? Well,
okay.
well, and now you're doing VS Code speech, which is
Yes.
nothing to do with the piano, but it's the best segue I had.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. So this was a busy month for me to improve the speech support in VS Code. I've demoed it already a couple of times in the last release parties. I just wanted to shout out something because now that you were showing the release notes, a little feature that we did. If you open the release notes in VS Code, and this was done by a colleague in my team,
Let me see the tab
settings
here.
that appear. Settings that appear in the release notes can actually be changed directly from the release notes. So that is a pretty cool addition. So whenever you see this little gear icon here, you can click that, and then you can try out a new setting directly from here. So that's a way to sell features more easily.
Oh, that's very nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it works if you open the release notes in VS Code. So speaking about speech, again, maybe you remember from last time when I showed this, speech support in VS Code is driven mainly by this extension, VS Code Speech, which was also updated as part of the VS Code February release. I will show a feature that actually works without Copilot Chat, but I'm also showing Copilot Chat. So if you have Copilot Chat installed, you can also benefit from the speech extension. You can actually use your voice to directly talk into Copilot Chat. But I want to start with a feature which is actually working without Copilot Chat inside your editor. And I will maybe first show the command because that's maybe easier. So let's just search for dictation. So dictation in the editor means that you are able to use the speech extension once it is installed and then talk directly into the text editor. So as soon as you start that, you will actually see that there's a little microphone icon appearing, and then everything that I say gets directly put into the editor. And when I stop, the whole thing will turn a little bit from this gray tone to white to say that the recognition is done. All right, and then you hit escape.
Very nice.
So I hope everything is correct here. I cannot really, I don't remember what I said, but that's cool. So the idea here really is that we want to selectively make speech more powerful inside VS Code in other areas. And this was like a natural addition to what we already have in chat to put text into the editor. I should say that this is working really well with natural language. It's not a replacement for writing code. So still our speech extension is mainly for natural language. But for example, when we were writing our release notes, right, which is mainly text, natural text, it was really helpful. I should also say that it will work in other places where natural text is supported. So for example, if you write a commit message in the source control pane, it will work there as well. It also works in a commands panel if you have the GitHub pull request extension installed, if you do a code review. So basically, everywhere where you can put text, we want to add this kind of speech support more and more. I know that, for example, this month we're working on bringing it to the terminal as well in some inline chat capabilities. So it's like, it's coming nicely together, I think, the whole story. One thing which we also expand a little bit more is how you can use the keyboard to drive this feature. So I can actually just press Alt Command V and it will go into this mode. That's what I was just showing. But something that you can do, and maybe I enable the screencast mode for this. If you press and hold the key, it will actually run in this mode and do the transcription. And then if you release the key, it goes directly into the end as if you were pressing escape. So we call this walkie-talkie mode. It's something which is just like another way of using this feature. If you don't want to always press escape or stop, you just press and hold this key, release it when you're done, and then you're good. Moving to chat. So for those that haven't seen it, everywhere where there is like a chat input field, there is this microphone icon. One thing that we did, if you don't have the extension installed, that's actually something that I cannot show right now because I do have the extension installed. This icon will now appear always. And if you click it and you don't have the extension installed, the speech extension, it will actually drive you through the process of installing the speech extension. So that's like a bit of making it more discoverable that we have this feature, because otherwise you wouldn't know unless you install the speech
So the
extension.
microphone is there by default, and if you click on it, then it's like, hey, you need the speech extension.
Exactly, yeah. So if you really don't want it, and maybe this is like a feature that people didn't know, and this is true for every toolbox that we have, there's always a right click. This is maybe something that new. Like everywhere you can click, every toolbar you can right click and say, I don't want to see this icon, so you can hide it. This is actually also true for extensions. I don't want you to hide the microphone icon. I just say, because this is actually, but yeah, so you get the idea. I think this is just to make it more discoverable. But one thing that you can also do here now, talking about this walkie-talkie mode. So here as well, you can press the key combination, and then you can release it, and it will actually submit what you say. So in that regard, it works a little bit different than in the editor, because in the editor, when you're done with the key binding or with the speech, it just gets put into the editor. But in the chat extension, if you submit your speech, so to say, it will actually talk to GitHub Copilot in this case and give you a result. Last but not least, I know people have been asking for this. There is now support for other languages. So by default, the speech recognition works best in English. And it will actually not work with other languages unless you go into settings. And I just opened the settings editor, went to speech settings. And fortunately, we have quite a large list of languages that you can pick from. There's a lot of English variants that I wasn't even aware there are so many. So that's cool, from everywhere in the world. But then there are also other languages, German, Korean, Portuguese. And these are coming in as a separate extension. So let me just run through that. Let's say you pick German, and then let's go back to this this microphone icon. And then you get a little dialog that will ask you to install this extension, because these extensions are relatively large. We don't really want to bundle it all together. And why are they large? Because speech recognition runs on your machine offline, so no data is sent to any service. We actually have a local speech recognition model that computes your voice, recognizes your voice, and spits out the text. So I like to emphasize on that, but that means the extension is actually also a bit larger. And then once you click this install button, you will actually see that there is an extension coming in, German language support for vscode speech. And yeah, from then on, you can use that language. So if I search for all speech-related extensions, you will see every language has an entry here, and then you can use your language for speech to text. I should say I'm very happy for feedback. So if you find that one of these languages doesn't work so well, or any other issue you encounter while using this, please let us know in issues on GitHub. We support Linux, Mac, and Windows with this on ARM and x64. So if there's some platform that doesn't work for you, just let us know. But yeah, that's all I had on my end.
That was awesome. So that answers Ahmad's question here about, does it work with Arabic? Is there an Arabic language extension in there?
Not that I'm aware of. So I should say also shout out here to the Azure Speech team. There's a whole different team that provides this library to us. And they are kind enough to provide me with all these languages. And these 26 languages are all the languages that they also officially support from their end. But I'm in contact with their PM, and he was suggesting any new language that we should support should just be directed to us, and then we can forward that to the team. So I think for now it's not supported, but I think the more people want this, the higher maybe the chances to get this in. So please file feature request for this.
Yeah, where should Ahmad go to request this?
In the VS Code repository, this is fine. It's just file it on the VS Code official repository, and then I will take it from there. That's
awesome.
True for all the issues, yeah, for VS Code, for speech, yeah.
So let's see here. How can I hide the yellow star? I want to use keyboard shortcuts only. I think they're talking about the Copilot Sparkle.
Okay, yeah,
is it right?
That's a good point.
You don't want to right Sparkle.
There's no right click here. I can actually not say. I would have to take that back to the team and ask if there's a setting.
Is that a thing, chat? Do you want to hide the sparkle? Drop a 1 in chat if you want to hide the sparkle.
Sure if there's a setting.
Yeah, all the languages. Does it support Swahili? I don't know. Okwar, take a look in your VS Code and see if it's in there. Include
Yeah,
fantasy languages like
just
Elvish.
open.
Yeah.
I mean, just to
Arrakis.
make it clear, all these
German.
languages are backed by a relatively large model with probably a lot of work going in. I wish they were fantasy languages, but they
So
are not.
it's interesting. I always thought, Ben, that the operating system was doing the speech translation, because I think that's built into both Windows
Yeah.
and Mac. But you're saying we're shipping the
Yeah.
recognition?
Yeah. So we looked into what the platform provides. It's true that some platforms have this built in, but we really wanted to make sure that we have a solution that, first of all, works offline and doesn't require your audio or recordings to be sent to some online service. And as at least for macOS, for example, when I was exploring it, it looked like, or it seemed like that you cannot really prevent that from happening. And the other reason why we built it this way is that now we can really control the integration end to end in our UI the way we want it, very nicely. So it feels much more integrated. And I also have a feeling from the performance and the quality, it's really working well. And it's fast and it's not so high on CPU and memory that it is actually an issue to run it, right? So yeah, we explored it, but I think we felt this is a better fit. And especially on Linux, for example, where I think there's nothing out of the box, this will work on Linux, on the platforms that we support, on the operating systems that we support. It will work there as well.
So is there a way to get Copilot to speak back to you instead of listening
That's a great question, because this is actually something for me to look into. Maybe next release party I can demo it. The library that we are using has support for text to speech. So it's an item to look at it. Maybe when you get a Copilot chat response, there's a new way that the VS Code will talk back to you, and then you can just lean back and don't use your keyboard at all anymore. So yeah, excited to explore that. It's on the plan.
All right, good suggestion. So I want Copilot to fuel no. We're not going to let Copilot handle the security incidents. Good to see you, though. Glad you're here. Yeah, we want to we want to be speaking Copilot and the output text. I had this thought, Ben. Like, I know we're on a tangent now, but it's like maybe finally smart speakers will actually be helpful. You know what I mean? Like, when is it going to show up on the speaker to where I could be like, well, mine's called computer, but no, it even heard that. Never mind.
Yeah,
but when can you say like Alexa and then get like a response from? Are you working on that at all?
We have this. I showed this last time. This Hey Code feature, which is also driven by the library. So when you enable this keyword activation mode, it will not work on your smart speakers, which are outside of VS Code. So it has to be the machine where VS Code is running. But when VS Code is in focus, if you say Hey Code, it should actually execute one of these actions. It wasn't working right now. This is always a problem with voice demos. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But try it out. It's called keyword activation. You say Hey Code, and then it actually executes, for example, the chat in Vue here. This was a bit of an exploration. We are not fully sold on the idea, but it works. So it's just cool what you can do with this library. There are many things, right? And this is one of it.
That's awesome. Ben, thank you so much for being here and talking about VS Code speech. That's quite an interesting development, both for Copilot and for interaction in VS Code. I made quite a few bits of content, chat. Curious if y'all are using the speech specifically when interacting with an AI. I guess, Ben, my final question for you is, how do you envision this? Is this primarily a way to interact with Copilot, or is it primarily an accessibility feature? Is it both?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I just had a discussion today in the team about this. I think there are already accessibility tools that are third-party that you install that are specifically tailored for accessibility. And they will probably go beyond of speech-to-text recognition, for example, by allowing you to say certain phrases that can trigger commands. We are currently not planning to support that. So we are focusing more on the how to interact with natural language, right? So it would probably not be a replacement for established accessibility tools that you can install. But nevertheless, our plan was to actually do some user studies and also learn from users how are they using this, and then we can expand the scope of this feature into other areas. The more we learn what is useful for our users, right? So I think, long story short, we want to make sure VS Code is accessible with third-party speech-to-text tools. So if there's a bug there, we want to fix it because there's already tools that are 20 years old and work perfectly fine. But then at the same time, this feature, we build it more from the speech-to-text capabilities for natural language, and then maybe selectively we pick some topics from the accessibility area over. So yeah, this is like the what we envision for the future.
All right, so we got a few more questions here, Joyce. We're coming. I promise. Here, I know we're over time. So, will Copilot speech work on PyCharm? So, welcome to the VS Code live stream where we're going to answer questions about PyCharm. I think, Ed, are you referring to the GitHub Copilot extension for PyCharm? I think that, assuming that's what Ed's referring to here, I would say I don't know about dictation in that editor.
So what I'm not fully aware of PyCharm capabilities, but for example, notebooks have a inline chat experience as well. And anywhere where we surface, so the idea is anywhere where we surface Copilot chat boxes in the UI, including notebooks, you would be able to see a microphone icon and use speech. As far as can you input text to other places, for example, notebooks, that's a great feature request. We're not supporting that yet, but it makes sense, I think, that wherever you can put natural language, at least, as I said, code probably doesn't work so well, but wherever you can put natural language, that we expand the capabilities. So if you just keep them feature requests coming around this, we want to collect and see also how the community wants to use this feature.
Awesome. All right. Well, Ben, thank you for being with us. And we got a great question here from, oh yeah, chat, please. Thank you. Thank Ben for being here. He's a busy fellow. All the engineers are. And so we really appreciate it when they take time out of their day to be here. Thanks, Ben. Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
So here's a great question. That's a great segue. Not only is this a great question, but it's a great segue, so I'm going to use it. Does Copilot understand my entire project at a go, or is there a way to expand Copilot's capabilities? If only I had a guest who could help us with this one. We just so happen to. Hey, Joyce.
Hey, Burke, how's it going?
Going very well. So this is a very good question and kind of goes right into what you're going to chat with us about today, which is extensibility, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in our latest release, you may have read the release notes, we announced that we are preparing to finalize a set of extension APIs that will allow extension developers like you to extend Copilot Chat. And that's, incredibly exciting. We've been working on these APIs for quite some time now, and have been doing extensive discussions on the team to make sure that they're in great shape. And today, what I'm going to be telling you about is how you can use these chat extension APIs to extend what Copilot knows, to bring your own context to Copilot Chat, to really ground it in information that only you have, and to ultimately make Copilot work much better for you. So first, I'm going to do a demo of what we're going to build, and then we're going to do a deep dive on how we actually build it. So awesome. Here, I'm in VS Code. On the left-hand side here, I've got a SQL database. I'm connected to it using the Microsoft SQL extension. And as you can see here, I've got 3 tables here. This is an app for university course and module information. And so, these tables are kind of named what you'd expect. And here I'm going to go into chat on the right. And suppose I want help writing a SQL query to combine all of the information from all of these tables. So if I just go in right now and say that, how do I combine information from all my tables in my database using a SQL query? So, Copilot's going to try its best, but because it doesn't know actually what's in my database right now, it's going to give me a pretty generic answer. And that's not super helpful for what we're doing here. But imagine if there was a way for me to provide that context. I mean, this table is all loaded up in VS Code anyway. And in fact, here I've got this MS SQL demo chat participant. You can think of a chat participant as just an expert that's plugged into Copilot Chat that has access to additional context. And so here, if I just ask the exact same question, so let's go back in here and copy that out. And here you see that I get a progress indicator that says, Copilot Chat is reading my database context. And so it's going to pull in information about what tables I have, what column names I have, what types those column names are, and so on. And it's going to send all of that along with my question to the large language model on the other side, which is GPT-4 here. And so you can see here that this query looks a lot better than what we had before. It actually references the tables that are in my database, and that's because we actually told it what was in the database. And I even have this nice run query button down here. So when I click on this button, a few things are going to happen really quickly. There's going to be a new SQL editor that gets opened with this query, and then we're actually going to execute that query against my database connection using the Microsoft SQL extension. So I'm going to go click the button right here, and you get my editor here, and then in the middle, I get my results editor. And as you can see, this query worked perfectly. It is exactly what I wanted. And this is, a testament to what you can do with Copilot Chat when you bring in that additional custom context that maybe isn't already built in. So to answer that earlier question, Burke, we do actually already have a chat participant at Workspace. And this is a participant that knows about the context of your code base, but it's not going to see absolutely everything. And that's where the custom chat participants come in. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch over to this new window, which has a different theme here. And we're going to do a deep dive on how you actually built that experience that I just demoed for you. So you already know how to do VS Code extension development. This right here is just the Yo code generator output. It's just, a sample boilerplate extension. And I've got my package.json file, the extension manifest, and I've gone ahead and filled out a couple of interesting pieces that I'll call out here. The first is that the extension that we're going to build, the @MS SQL demo extension, is going to depend on both Copilot Chat as well as the MS SQL extension from Microsoft. And we need that dependency on chat, of course, because we're integrating with the chat view. And for the MS SQL extension, we need that in order to get that database context back out. In addition to that, we also have a couple of API proposals. So for those who aren't familiar, all of our APIs for our extensions go through an extensive finalization process before you can publish an extension that consumes those APIs. And the motivation there is we just want to make sure that all of our APIs, once they are out there, never change, that we have backward compatibility until the end of time. And that really just makes sure that your extensions never have to update once we've published them. And so for now, these APIs that I'm going to demo to you today are still in a proposed state, but we expect, as I mentioned, to be finalizing them very soon. So first of all, let's go ahead and tell VS Code about our chat participants. So here I'm going to go into the contribute section of our package.json and say I want to contribute a new chat participant. And so let's give it a name. The name is just going to be MS SQL demo, which is, what you would type into chat to be able to address your expert. And then let's give it a description, and it is going to be something like ask questions about writing SQL queries. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And since this is a static contribution, if I go into chat now and I type @ that's already going to populate MS SQL demo in the chat input. Pretty cool. Next up, we're going to go into the extension.ts file, which is where we do all of the magic. So in this activate method here, we're going to register our chat participant in code. And the way that we do that is with this new namespace, vscode.chat, and we call it create chat participant. Again, the name is going to be exactly the same as what we had in the package.json file. And then in this handler here, there are a couple of parameters that I'm going to explain in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and get that all plugged up. And here, so the first interesting thing to call out is how do you know what question the user asked? That is available to us as request.prompt. And so here, this is just going to be user question. So my participant receives a question from a user. What do I do with that? We want to forward that along to the large language model. The way to do that is with a second API, vscode.lm, that stands for
Hey,
language
Joyce,
model.
could you bump your font size up just one more?
Absolutely.
There we
Yeah.
go.
And let's close that out too. All right. And so here I have vscode.lm.send chat request. And this is going to be the way that we forward the user's question to a large language model. The language model that we're going to be using here is Copilot GPT-4. I want to note also that you could, in theory, also say you want Copilot GPT 3.5. In particular, if you're developing a feature that is extremely latency sensitive, like maybe it's something that shows up as the user is typing, you probably want something that's going to respond relatively quickly, and GPT 3.5 just is a little bit faster at the cost of maybe quality of the answer. So just wanted to call out that that's also an option there. And so, yeah, we're going to be sending our request to GPT-4. This is the same model that we use for Copilot chat itself. And then the second argument here is just going to be an array of messages. So the way that we communicate with large language models is through chat messages. And I'll explain a little bit what those are and define this variable in just a moment here. But just filling out the rest of these, we don't need any custom options for today's demo, so I'm just going to pass an empty object. And then finally, we're going to forward along the cancellation token that we received as the fourth argument here. All right, so now let's go ahead and define our array of chat messages. So a chat message, in this case, we're going to start by creating a user message that wraps the user question here. So here we have a nice language model chat user message. And the argument to this is just going to be the user question that was asked. So user question. And with this code, we already have enough to take the user's question and forward that to a large language model. And I'm just going to fix up this compiler error right here, return undefined. So this is great, but at this point in time, Copilot's only going to see the user question, and it's not going to be much better than if I just asked regular Copilot that question about how I write a SQL query. So what I'd love to do is also bring in that database context, and for this, we're just going to use a function that I already have written that gets database context from the MS SQL extension API. And in particular, the context that we're pulling in here is going to be a set of creation scripts. So that's, the scripts that you would run to create that database. And that's going to include information like which tables I had in that database and what their column names are. That's going to be enough information for Copilot to figure out what the structure of my database actually is. So here, I'm just going to go call my get database context function here and add that import. And then I'm going to just add a new line between that and the user's question. And that's, the user question as well as the database context that we're all passing along to the large language model here. The one other thing here, though, is we would also like to be able to steer the assistant's response. So what I mean by that is that, how some people have been able to get Copilot to respond like it's a pirate or something like that. All of that behavior is set in what we call a system message. And in this case, we really want to have a system message in order to constrain the space of what Copilot is going to respond with. Because, for example, I always want to make sure that it comes back to me with a SQL query suggestion. And if it doesn't give me that, then that's not a very good answer. So all of this information is behavior that we can define in a system message. And so let's go ahead and also define a language model chat system message here. And let's tell Copilot, you are a SQL expert. Your job is to suggest SQL queries that are performant, readable, and correct. You should return your SQL query as a markdown code block that begins with triple backtick, SQL, and ends with triple backtick. And that is pretty much all the information that we need to pass along to the model here. So now let's actually do something interesting with the chat request. We submitted a request. We want to make sure that the answer that we get back from the model is actually reported back to the VS Code UI. So here, I'm going to save off the result into a chat request variable here. And the way that we get data back out, you'll remember seeing that when we actually submit a question to chat, we get a response that streams progressively back. And that's just great for, perceived performance of the chat UI, because the user doesn't have to wait until all of that data comes back to be able to see the full response. Instead, we stream it in as we get new tokens. And all of that functionality is built directly into the VS Code API. So you can do this with just a simple for loop. So here we're going to do for await const token of chat request dot stream. And the stream here is an async iterable. So it yields new tokens as they become available from the large language model. And all we're going to do is look at the response parameter here, which will give us a way to say that we received a new markdown token. And actually, you know what? Let's make sure that the whole response is marked down as well. You should return your response as markdown flavored text. And that's just going to make sure that chat is actually able to render the response that's returned. So with just this amount of code, we've submitted a chat request to a large language model, and we've streamed the response back into chat. So one of the missing pieces left now is, you'll recall that I had a run query button that was really nice, and that allowed me to execute my query directly inside VS Code. Let me close this window out, actually. And what I'd like to do now is to re-implement that functionality. So again, the way that we do this is with the response.button API, and this allows us to insert a button anywhere in the chat response. The title of this button is going to be run query. The command is going to be msql.run chat query, and we'll implement that command in just a second. And for the arguments, we are going to pass the SQL query that the large language model suggested. And you'll see here that I don't have that defined yet, and that's because we need to actually keep track of all the data that we're getting back from the stream. So let's also just keep track of that, and we're just going to concatenate all of the new data that comes back to us to this data variable here. And then once that's done, we are going to parse the SQL block out of that data variable. So here's a regex that we're going to write that is going to look for a markdown code block that begins with triple backtick and matches on 0 or more characters. Oops. And ends with triple backtick. And you might be wondering why I had a question mark here, like why I made SQL optional. And the reason for that is just because even though we did say in the system message that you have to start your code block with triple backtick SQL and end it with triple backtick SQL, sometimes we find that the model doesn't do exactly what we want. And so on the one hand, we want to make sure that we're tuning our prompts to ensure maximum adherence, but at the same point in time, if we can be a little bit more tolerant in our parsing, and make the feature that we're building ultimately a little bit more reliable for the user, we take that opportunity where we can. So in this case here, we're just going to do SQL regex.exec against the data variable here, and that's going to give us a match. And so if the match was successful, then we are just going to make our response button with the argument SQL query, and that's just going to be match 2. Great. And let's also make sure that we register our command here. That button actually does something. Register command and MSSQL run chat query. Here I have one argument. That's just going to be the SQL query that we want it to execute. And right here, what we're going to do is use another function that I've already defined. And this integrates with the MSSQL extension. It runs the new query as well as the run query commands from that extension in order to reuse that functionality and not reinvent the wheel. So here, it's just call run query. And with this, I think we have everything that we need to recreate what I demoed for you earlier. Oh, one more thing real quick. So you'll see this await function here with await get database context. This can sometimes take a while, and just in the interest of making sure that the user knows what they're waiting for, let's also go ahead and say in the response that progress is happening and that we are reading database context. And that's just going to make the experience be a little bit more responsive. And now let's go ahead and hit F5. And so you'll see I'm back in my window here, waiting on my extensions to activate. And just a moment here. Should get our SQL table back. We can try asking that question again.
Come on, SQL.
You got this.
I gotta tell you, Joyce, that's one of the most impressive coding demos I've ever seen for two reasons. One is that I don't think you made any typos. And secondly, you wrote a regex on the fly. I thought you were going to paste it in, but you just wrote it. I feel like I should just retire.
Well, I'm very inspired by you. So all credit to you.
Away. Yeah.
All right. So let's try that question again with the extension that we just built here. We're reading database context. And that, as I mentioned, is going to take a while.
Very nice.
So we're very happy that we have progress here. And as before, it knows what my tables are, and I can go ahead and hit that run button if I want to. Yeah, I think that's all that we have time for today. So also wanted to take any questions that might have come up in chat. But yeah, I just wanted to show how easy it is to bring new context directly into chat in order to personalize your experience and to make Copilot chats suggestions even more personable and direct and actionable for you.
That was awesome. I didn't even say anything. I'm just going to let Joyce go. That was incredible. I was enraptured. Let me go back up. I'm going to try to get to all your questions here. We got a lot. Doug, what's up, Doug? Doug has been a guest on the show a couple times. Is there a difference between agent and participant, Joyce?
Those are the same thing. So we used to call this API chat agent, and that's now been renamed to chat participant.
So you can use either?
Yes.
Let's see here. What else? What theme? This is always the question. What's your editor theme here?
So in the extension development host, I just have dark modern, which is, one of my favorite themes. But then in this window here, I actually have an AI generated theme. And so that is, so I have a personal extension that also uses the proposed APIs, and it lets me generate vscode themes from natural language.
Can you show us?
The one, yeah, I think it's working here. How do I generate a theme that represents happy coding?
How is it going to translate happy coding into colors?
So the system prompt behind the scenes, and I think this repo is on GitHub and it's just public, so you can go look it up after if you want. But the way that we do this is we ask it for color tokens, and then my teammate Daniel has this library that will take a minimal set of color tokens and convert that into a full-on VS Code theme. And so that's all that this extension does here. And so like here, let's see, I don't know if this is quite yeah. All right, so now it's actually generated this new theme.
That's actually not bad. That's a fairly decent theme for a GPT generated. I've always kind of wanted this, Joyce, like you have like artwork that you really like and you're like, man, I love the colors in this artwork. I wish I could just give this to and say, generate me a VS Code theme based on this picture that I really like.
Oh, totally. Yeah. The future is here. I mean, the possibilities with this, like one of the amazing things about our APIs is that they're pretty minimal, but they're also extremely expressive, and you can do so much. Like you can do a SQL extension. You can also just make new themes based on like song lyrics and stuff. It's awesome.
That's incredible. So here's a great question about the prompt engineering that you were doing there, where does it matter, like when you were saying you should, I can't remember if you said should or must return markdown in the response, like in the system message, like in your experience, how much does that or does that not matter, that getting that phrasing exactly right and using should versus must or vice versa?
I think that must is probably, more forceful, but either of them in practice should work pretty well.
But in your experience, the model is not so sensitive as to care a whole lot between.
We have seen, though, that going from GPT 3.5 to 4, GPT 3.5 didn't pay as much attention to what we said in the system prompt as GPT 4. And so now that we're on GPT 4 for panel chat, it matters a little bit less what kinds of language we use. You've also maybe already seen that there were versions of GPT 4 that would adhere better to your request if you offered it a tip or something like that. And so, depending on which version even of the specific model that you're dealing with, you might also need to further tweak your prompt.
Yeah, I guess in my experience working with these large language models, I just feel like I still don't know after all this time how to get the answer that I want the first time. And I end up tweaking it just over and over and over and over, trying to get the phrasing right to get the right answer. And I know that there's like some best practices. For instance, OpenAI says, don't tell the model what not to do, tell it what to do. But
Totally.
again, that doesn't seem to make any difference, at least when I try to do it.
Yeah.
All right. If there's another DB context that affects your project, I'm guessing you could add as many things to your ChatGPT context as you want.
Yep. Yeah, you can do whatever you want here. And we didn't really have time for this, but one of the other pieces of API that we have is this concept called chat variables. And that's still, a little farther. It's not as far along as the chat participants concept, but the basic idea is that with chat participants, you fully control the prompt. So you control all of the chat messages that get sent along to the large language model. With variables, sometimes you just want to share like a small piece of context. And maybe, you want to be able to share that across all of the different chat participants that show up in chat. Or you just want to make that piece of data modular and reusable. And so for that, we have this concept of chat variables. And so you can see here that we have several different kinds of chat variables. So hash code base is pretty similar to what you would do if you do at workspace search, except that you can compose queries that reference your code base, but that aren't necessarily using the at workspace participant. And so what you could do in that scenario is if you had multiple different kinds of database context, you could define variables for all of those as well. And that could be an alternative. Another thing to call out is that participants can have / commands that are associated with them, and that allows you to kind of route the user's query to different prompts under the hood. For example,
different system commands. Yes?
Yeah, different commands within that participant. So here, for example, I have at workspace, and within it, I have 5 different / commands. So explain, which is for explaining my code, fix, which is for fixing problems in my code, /new, which is for generating new workspaces, /new notebook, which is for generating new Jupyter notebooks, and /tests, which is for generating unit tests. And so behind the scenes, when you invoke each of these, that's going to be a completely different prompt. And so that's also a way for you to avoid, like in this scenario, if you wanted to say like at MS SQL demo and then / scenario 1 / scenario 2 or something like that, that's another way that you could avoid just, blowing up the list of chat participants while still being able to account for different scenarios in your functionality.
Yeah, so different modalities for interacting with the API, with the AI, and then surfacing that to the user.
Totally.
I've written a variable myself. It's not complicated, but it's just URL, and it pops open a little bar, and you can just input a URL to a web page, and then it downloads the content of that and feeds it into the prompt to try to ground it, because I was doing some Blazor dev, and I was like, I wish I could just say, look at this this docs page, which is like this long. But then the thing I ran into was, what do you do when, in this case, the database is small, but let's assume that the database is massive, right? And it takes up the entire system message to send all of that across. What then?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the context that we're sharing here, we're actually not sharing the contents of the database. We're just sharing the structure of it. And so that tends to do okay in terms of the context window that we have available with GPT-4. But let's say that did happen. There are several different techniques that you can use to kind of compress the amount of context that you send all at once. One is to actually just issue a new language model request behind the scenes and ask Copilot to summarize that context in its own words, and then you feed just the summary back into the actual request that you send. So that there are several different options for that. Another option is to look at all of the things that you want to include in the context and then remove the parts that are not so interesting. Again, maybe by asking Copilot or maybe by doing embedding search of some sort. And so there are really lots of options here, and it's going to ultimately depend on the specific scenario that you're building out.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I ended up doing, was using actually from Eric's demo, but using LangChain and just using an OpenAI embedding. And I wasn't even sure, Chad, I wasn't even sure what I was doing, but it's actually not that hard. LangChain docs are pretty good. You just sort of tell it like, hey, split the text up and then query it based on natural language, almost like you were talking to the model, and then take that result and ask the model. All right, let's see. Doug's asking, can any extension in the VS Code ecosystem be called like PowerShell?
Do you mean registering a chat participant for any extension, or do you mean referencing context from that extension? I guess,
yeah, Doug, maybe
yeah. So in this particular case with the SQL extension, the context that we're getting is from the extension itself. So if the extension didn't already expose that context, it would need to add code to do that. But any extension can register a chat participant. And once the APIs are finalized, then any extension can publish that update as well and have it be usable more widely.
Yeah, because we have a similar question, like, can Copilot be integrated with Supabase? And if Supabase makes an extension, they can add a participant to their extension.
Exactly. Yes.
Let's see here. Do you have a link for training? Does Joyce have a link for training? Training on what? Training on how to code so well, or how to type with making 0 errors, how to write regex on the fly, or how to build a chat extension? Well, I guess if we had a link, do we have a link for folks here? Producer,
We do actually have a documentation link, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think if you go to code.visualstudio.com, we just published an entire documentation page about how you can build a chat extension. We do also have a GitHub repository, VS Code extension samples, and there is a chat extension sample in there. And so if you wanted to, you can just fork that and kind of play around with the API and get started that way.
Awesome. Let me just see. There's so many. I just want to make sure I get to all of these here. I often find deprecated features in the response that I get. Ed, are you talking about like from the AI? You get answers that contain deprecated features?
That is the thing that can happen, and that depends really on the model version that we're using and the knowledge cutoff that model has. And so we're continually working to upgrade the version of the model that we're using in order to mitigate the effect of those knowledge cutoffs. But one of the ways that you can mitigate that as yourself as well is by building a new chat variable that has access to the most updated context and then passing that along to Copilot instead.
Yeah. So like once you get behind the scenes chat, you can do whatever, right? You can pass in specific documentation. I mean, the possibilities here are endless. I used to work at an enterprise company, and we had this really long Word doc that basically was a style guide. And there were certain things they wanted you to use and not use, and name variables a certain way. And at that time, we didn't have tools like Prettier or things like that, but it would have been so nice to write a chat participant that knew about that style guide and could look at your code and be like, you need to fix this, 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 and this, or nobody's going to merge your pull request. All right. Joyce, thank you so much for being with us. I mean, that was that was an incredible demo. And chat, I think we're super excited to see what y'all build with chat extensibility. As always, it's what you build with Visual Studio Code that is truly incredible. So that's awesome. All right, Joyce, thank you so much for being with us. Chat, please thank Joyce for being here. That was an incredible demo. Thank you so much. I know you're going to be doing that demo, I think, at coming up. I don't know, is that secret? Do we want to mention like MVP summits coming up or something like that to that effect?
I mean, I think that's public knowledge. So
okay, yeah. So if you're MVPs, maybe you can see Joyce there live and in person. Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, chat, for being with us. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Ben. That's the 1.87 release highlights, and we will see you back here next month for 1.88. When does 2.0 come around, Joyce?
Probably never. I think we're just going to keep bumping that minor version.
I had that thought the other day. I was like, what does VS Code 2.0 look like? I have no idea. All right, chat. Thanks so much. Thank you, Joyce. See y'all
Thank you.
next month, next week. See you soon.